Hi, I'm Kesenya from Guiding Star with Kesenya. Thanks so much for joining me for this special series all about Saturn and his transits through each of the houses in the horoscope. Some of you might be familiar with a video I've done in the past all about Saturn and his transit through the sign of Aquarius and where that's going to fall for each sign. This video series may be a little similar to that. We might cover similar topics of information, but there will also be more depth in this series. So I thank you for joining me for this ongoing series throughout this autumn. Can I also just say I would be so honored if you would subscribe to my YouTube channel and support the work that I do here in growing the knowledge of astrology throughout Australia and the world. So what is Saturn, first of all? Saturn is the seventh planet out from the sun, when we include the sun in this counting astrologically. Saturn is also the last of the visible planets that we can see with the naked eye in the sky at night. Beyond Saturn, to see Uranus, Neptune and Pluto, we need a telescope. And so it's considered in ancient astrology that Saturn is the planet that actually correlate, the final frontier, if you like, that correlates to our visible earthly reality, the manifested reality on planet Earth in this incarnation. Beyond that, Uranus, Neptune and Pluto all have correlations to our inner self, our psyche, our past lives, our wounds, our personal issues, and the way we think about things and the way we integrate things into our lives. So they are very psychological energies, whereas up until Saturn, we have both psychological things happening from those planets, but also material manifestation happening from the planets that we can see. It's an old Hermetic principle, which is called as above, so below, as without, so within. What we see in the sky above us is reflected in our reality on the earth. And the old principle taken further is also what is going on energetically within our soul and our psyche is also reflected on the outer in our earthly life as well. So Saturn, being the furthest planet out as a material planet, as a planet of manifestation, governs most strongly what happens on planet Earth, and for our individual journeys as well. And the reason that is that the further out you go with the planets, the more impact that they have on our lives here on Earth. That might seem a little bit odd. We might ordinarily think that the closer the planet, the greater impact it would have on us. Therefore, Venus should be the most impactful planet of all. But that's not the case in astrology, and it's to do with the time and the speed of a particular planet. With Saturn, its movement is so slow that the energy has time to build and therefore really pack a punch. Where Venus, or the moon if you want, for example, as well, they whiz around the astrological chart very quickly. The moon goes around in 1 month. Venus goes around in approximately, give or take, a year, depending on whether she goes retrograde or not. But Saturn takes 30 years to do a cycle of the astrological chart, and therefore the energy has a lot of time to accumulate in one spot, and therefore we feel the impact most strongly. Saturn, as with all planets, has things that it rules, things that it governs in this earthly reality that we experience. Saturn rules over structures, organizations, hierarchies, governments, regulations and rules. Saturn is also known as Father Time. He governs time here on planet Earth. There are some realms where time doesn't matter. Time is immaterial. But here on planet Earth, we are governed by time as a spirit being manifested into human material form. We are governed by time, and Saturn is the master of time. Saturn also represents things like responsibility, duty, hard work, maturity, perseverance, and endurance in life. These are all actually really great things, and we tend to receive the blessing of these Saturn positive qualities when we start getting into our mid to late 30s. That's when Saturn matures. In Vedic astrology, he reaches his maturation, and when he reaches his maturation, essentially we learn how to carry our burdens in life. And everyone at some point needs to learn that lesson. Certainly by the age of 35, 36, when Saturn matures, we step into our full adulthood. We're no longer young adults, we're no longer children, we have fully reached maturity, and hopefully, if we're manifesting at a high level, we've learned how to carry our burdens. Saturn represents structures, as I said, but also traditions. He is the master of the legacy we want to leave behind as well. He has a connection with the 10th house in astrology, which is all about legacy that we want to leave for those who come after us. He also has a connection to authority figures and those in authority over us. Saturn, on the more negative side of his energy, rules restriction and blockage, fear, holding things back, keeping things from us, and starving us of the things we like, but also equally starving us of the negative things in life if he is making a particular aspect in our natal chart. In astrology, Saturn is the ruler of two signs traditionally. The sign of Capricorn mainly, and then in traditional astrology, the sign of Aquarius. In modern astrology, Uranus is considered to be the ruler of the sign of Aquarius, but in traditional astrology, Saturn is the ruler of Capricorn and Aquarius. In archetypal astrology, Saturn is seen as the boss figure, the CEO. Because I like things to be a bit lighter and a bit more fun, I kind of envisage Saturn as kind of the head of control in the Get Smart series. If you're familiar with the Chief, he's managing all these bumbling idiots all around him trying to catch the bad guys. And here is the Chief just trying to keep everything under control, managed, well organized, well structured, and adhering to what needs to happen and the rules and principles of control in the series Get Smart. But he's still likable. A lot of people will paint Saturn to be the boogeyman of the horoscope. He's out to get you. He makes life tough. He's negative. And certainly some streams of astrology see him as the great malefic. I kind of liken him instead to the great father figure in the sky. If you imagine a father who's, his daughter or son is 16 and they're about to go out to a party, and dad, the father figure, is sitting there, and as they run out the front door and says, "Hang on, what time are you going to be home? Where are you going? I want the phone number of the place where you're going to be. Are there going to be any other adults at the party? You've got to do things properly, by the book. There's no being silly, and I want you home by 10 o'clock. And the children are like, "Oh, Dad." But Dad's strict and firm and doesn't budge an inch. He sets boundaries. He says, "No way, home by 10 o'clock. You're not going to be one of those children who's out running around the streets at all hours of the night, getting up to no good." So he is this protector, father figure energy, authority figure energy in the horoscope. Now, sometimes we see people manifesting Saturn in a very negative way. They are the authority figure with abuse and violence and control. Now, often that would indicate a connection with Mars in a chart if that's how it was playing out. But then there are other people who manifest beautiful Saturn energy that's benevolent. That is, lots of boundaries, lots of regulations and rules, but it's for your greater good. It's for your upliftment. It's for the betterment of yourself, society, humanity, whatever. So there are many ways Saturn can manifest, but he is always the energy of this protector father figure. Even in karmic astrology, Saturn represents our fears that we have from previous incarnations. For example, if you happen to fall off, and many people who've had readings with me will have heard this analogy, if you happen to in a past life fall off the Grand Canyon to plummet to your death, and then you reincarnate and you've got this fear of heights you can't explain, that's Saturn putting protective boundaries of fear in place so that you don't go and fall off the Grand Canyon again and plummet to your death in the next life. So he is very much about our psychic protection or karmic protection, and sometimes people see him as a representation of karmic blockage based on the hurts and the wounds and the fears we've experienced in past incarnations. According to the reading I've done, Saturn rules the gemstone qualities of obsidian, also tourmaline and hematite, the heavy black stones that are, in the case of tourmaline especially, particularly good at absorbing energy. Saturn also correlates to the color brown, which is why for this series I'm dressing in very autumnal tones of brown. And as a ruler of the earth sign of Capricorn, Saturn is a very earthy type of planet and it has a lot of earth energy about him. And so one of the remedies that we can offer for any Saturn troubled times is to be in nature or to walk barefoot on the earth. Saturn also rules rocks and gravelly soil and rocky places. Isolated places do come under Saturn's governance occasionally as well. So to be in those places is actually to be in a Saturnian environment, or to live in a garden full of rocks or a house that's made of stone is a very Saturnian environment to live in. Saturn also governs things like minimalism and restraint and restriction. If we were to have Saturn sitting permanently in our first house, then we might find that our body was restricted in some way, either through our size is restricted, or our height. So either our outward expression or our upward expression would be restricted. Saturn would be affecting our body in that way. So he rules restriction and restraint. So that's a little, in a nutshell, picture of what Saturn as a planet represents. Now we're going to dive into what it means to have Saturn transiting through the houses. But first, let's start with an explanation of how to assess where Saturn is according to whole sign astrology by transit. So how can we tell if Saturn is transiting through the 11th house in our horoscope? Well, the first thing we need to do is go to a piece of technology or an app like planetwatcher.com or astro.com and have a look at the chart of the moment, and that will tell us where Saturn is currently sitting, in what sign of the chart Saturn is currently sitting in. As I'm recording this in 2020, we're seeing Saturn just moving into the sign of Aquarius, and so I'm going to use that as our illustration. So once you know what sign Saturn is currently sitting in, then you need to work out if it's in your 11th house in whole sign astrology. So for Aquarius rising, where Saturn is currently sitting, we would be looking at being Aries rising, because the sign of Aquarius happens to be 11 houses from the rising sign of Aries. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11, obviously. That's how we tell. Now, if we happen to be watching this video and it's a few years down the track, let's say that Saturn's in the sign of Aries. Well, obviously that's not going to be your 11th house. That's the rising sign if you're an Aries person. So the 11th house for Aries, when Saturn's in Aries rather, will be pretty much 1, 2, 3 houses. And that will give us the rising sign of Gemini. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 houses from the rising sign of Gemini in whole sign astrology. So you can apply that to any situation, look at where Saturn currently is and work out, is it your 11th house? Let's go back to the example we're using, which is Aries rising and Saturn falling in Aquarius, their 11th house. What does that mean for you? Well, this is a season of life. It's going to last 2.5 to 3 years, where you're going to be very focused on defining your goals, defining your ambitions, working out what will make you happy in life, what will make you happiest. Because this is the house, the 11th house is the house of goals, dreams, ambitions, aspirations, the things that, we want to, the rewards we want to get for our hard work. Do you want to win the Nobel Peace Prize? Do you want to get a pay rise? Do you want to get the Order of Australia? Like, the rewards, the accolades, the goals, the recognition, the money that you get from the work you do, as well as the aspirations you have for what you want your life to look like. It's a very visionary, forward-thinking house, forward-looking house. So this is where a lot of your energetic focus is going to be for the next 2.5 to 3 years of this transit. What's going to make you happiest in life? Will it be winning the Nobel Peace Prize? Or maybe what will make you happiest in life is developing a utopian village that you can live in with all your best friends. You know, what does it look like? What does happiness look like to you now? What's the vision for happiness? What's your life vision is the question that might come up quite frequently during this transit. What will bring fulfillment to you that goes beyond just status and money? Yes, rewards for the work we do is a big part of the 11th house, but it's also, as I said, quite a utopian house that's focused on ideals and visions and goals for the future, and oftentimes they don't actually have anything to do with money. Money is the means to achieving those things, but the actual goal and dream or vision is something quite different. I gave an illustration a moment ago of, living in an Epicurean style village, commune, society. For many people, that's a dream they have, but by God, you've got to have money to set that thing up. Maybe having a self-sufficient farm might be your vision, your dream, your goal, where you just live off your own resources, but money's needed to make that happen too. Maybe your vision, your goal, your dream is to open a school, a very special school that works on different principles, but you've got to jump through a lot of hurdles and hoops to set that up, or you've got to have a lot of money behind you, property, land, blah, 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 to run the school from, like the list goes on. Our dreams and goals and visions often require a bit of financial lubrication to make them happen. So we are, in this case, Saturn in the 11th house, looking beyond mere money and mere status to what it is that we want to do that makes us happy. And then we start to get Saturnian about it and look at, well, how do we make this happen? How do we realistically get the leverage we need to cause this vision to become a part of our life? Saturn, through this portion of the chart, actually causes you, or will cause you, I should say, to explore things from a greater perspective regarding what satisfies you, regarding what brings you fulfillment. And so you get down to the nitty-gritty of what do you want from life? What is this vision? What is this ideal? And how do I make it happen, as I said? But you can also find that you break away from anything that's holding you back during this transit from actually achieving your vision, your dream. Now, let me point out that what happened through my life, if you watched last week's 10th house transit video, you'll know that I built up a career that was quite lucrative, but where I felt like a machine. And so it wasn't helping me fulfill the desires of my heart. In went Saturn into my 11th house, and I got a vision for what I wanted for my life. And I wanted to, I've always wanted to actually, but it became very real for me now, work for myself and have a job where it was on my terms, and where I was able to be involved in my children's life and around my children as they're growing up, and still be able to contribute quite hopefully at a high level to society through some sort of professional occupation. How was that going to work? How was that going to integrate? Well, during Saturn's transit of my 11th house, it gave me the opportunity to objectively look at how I could create that, how I could build that vision, how I could structure that vision, because I'd gone beyond mere status and money, and I'd moved into what is it really at the core that I want here. I want a family life that's sustainable, that's empowering, and a future for myself, career-wise, that feels like I'm giving something to humanity. The 11th house is about altruism, humanitarian causes. So what can I do? What can I build in order to give to the community, to give to the world, to give to humanity? These became my priorities and my focus during this transit. So you will start to realize what it is you actually deep down want from life with a much bigger perspective than what you've had over the last few years, and break away from anything that's holding you back from this vision. As I said, I left my previous occupation as a town planner in order to be able to pursue more what I wanted with my children, to be there for them and involved in their lives in a healthy way. And look, for a while that required me to step back and take a more menial position, more menial job. But eventually, throughout the course of this Saturn 11th house transit, I achieved my dream through hard work, through perseverance, through restructuring my life, to the point where I was able to run my own business, or am able rather to run my own business and share and give something to the world at large. So I was able to break away from the ideas of status and achievement that were holding me captive to a way of life that felt like I was just a machine on a treadmill, or a rat on a treadmill, or functioning as a robot or a machine in the service of someone else. One of the things that we need to be very careful of with this transit is the loss of friendships. Certainly that was the case for me. I had moved to a larger town, and I had found it really difficult to make friends in this other town. But look, it didn't bother me too much during this transit, because I knew that it was all about building this new life for myself, creating a new structure. But this is the house of friendship. And so when Saturn goes through the house of friendship, he kind of restricts and blocks our ability to make new friends. In my case, it was because I was so focused on learning and studying and achieving in this new realm that I wanted to manifest in my life. So didn't have time for friendships and going out and making networks and connections. That just fell by the by, and I was quite happy for that to be the case. It didn't worry me. But friendships and connections that actually aren't serving you will tend to fall away, and the ones that remain are the pure gold. We really find this during Saturn's transit to the house of friendship. We can also have problems with friends. I'll give you another illustration. I had a very dear friend who was kind of my one shoulder to lean on in the town that I moved to. And through circumstances completely out of my control and influences of people who are on a very interesting life journey with their astrology charts, I might add, my one dear friend that I had in this town was taken away from me, and it was very tragic and very sad and really heartbreaking, certainly from my perspective, how this manipulation occurred. But this is just the nature of Saturn in the 11th house, where there can be problems with friends, frustrations that occur with friendships, irritations that occur in friendship circles and networks and groups. And that's just part of this transit, okay? But if it does happen that you lose friendships, it's just what's meant to be. And because Saturn is such a karmic planet, it's highly likely that the loss of these friendships is karma repeating itself from past lifetimes. So you must guard and watch your response to these things, because you could be setting yourself up for another karmic repeat in the future, in a future life, depending on how you handle this loss of friends, or this restriction of friendship, or difficulties with friendships during this time. Saturn is karmic ripening. So, just be aware that that's the case, and try and go for the highest vibrational level of maturity and responsibility, graciousness, and self-honoring, I would add to that as well. Don't forget to honor yourself in dealing with your friendships. We find it's a really interesting transit and helpful transit to help us cull our Facebook lists. Get rid of the superfluous friendships that are actually more like dross. If you've heard of how they refine gold, they purify gold, and what's left over, like the pure gold comes out, and anything that you don't want is called dross. And that's kind of a purification process we're going through with our friendships when Saturn transits the 11th house. We get rid of the superfluous and the dross, and we're left with the pure gold in terms of our friendships and in terms of our networks. So our deep relationships grow stronger and richer during this transit. This purification of the friendship circle results in strong personal relationships that are left standing. And certainly I found that to be the case. It's been fabulous for that. My friends that I do have, and I have a beautiful core group of business associates that have become deep, intimate friends for me, as well as my actual friends that aren't associated with my business practices. These friendships have just become the rock that I stand on, the foundation, the strength. Saturn rules rocks, Saturn rules foundations. And so your friends that remain will become like the foundation that you build your future on now. They will be invaluable for you. And you might find that you develop friendships with people who are Saturnian, a lot older than you, maybe wiser than you, friends with greater wisdom that they can contribute to your life, maybe even friends with greater authority in some realm than you have. And this can happen to assist you in building your new vision, as I said, building your dreams, building your aspirations. So you can have the right people come into your life to focus you in the right direction while the wrong ones dissolve away and leave. So in my case, I found through the 11th house Saturn transit that I have a core group of about 4 beautiful women who we check in with each other weekly, sometimes more than once a week or twice a week. We check in with each other. They're all working in spiritual work. They're all working in similar realms to me, and we have each other's back. We hold space for one another. We allow one another to just vent and cry or feel exasperated. We allow celebration between one another through joy as well, and that has been it's been a catalyst actually for the ability to develop and build my dream, my goal, to expand, to meet my destiny, because of the networks of support that are my pure gold foundation now. They're very, very valuable. So in that sense, this is a beautiful transit for making necessary refinements to friendships and also business support networks. Saturn transiting through the 11th house can actually cause us to have a bigger focus on humanitarian issues, utopian societies, idealism, causes and dreams and goals that have to do with the greater collective good, with community advancement and community betterment. So that can become very prominent in your life right now. Certainly, I've always had a dream to have, and even be belonging to a very self-sufficient society where people, trade their produce and so forth. And that's always been there. But I'm finding with this transit, because I'm actually reaching the last legs of this Saturn transit through my 11th house this year, I'm finding that this is becoming a greater driver for me, a greater desire for me. I'm longing to have this more and more and more in my life. So again, this reveal of humanitarian or utopian ideals becomes stronger in our life as this transit goes on, and we might find ways to actually materialize it. I'll tell you at the end of this transit whether that happens. Now, in the Hindu system, when Saturn transits through the 11th house, it obviously is making an aspect to the 11th house, and it can be giving problems to things to do with friends, groups, and older siblings, which in Hindu are represented by the 11th house. So there can be blockages with those kind of relationships. There can be restrictions. There can be difficulties and challenges with relationships with those people. Saturn in the 11th house in the Hindu system. Now, Saturn will also be aspecting the first house in the Hindu system with this transit. So there can be a blockage of advancement in life that occurs with this transit. So you just might feel like you're getting nowhere, like you're sort of pushing your head up against a brick wall and nothing's budging. There can be health problems also because of this aspect. And you just might feel that there's just no favoritism, no luck going your way, no support from the universe for what you're wanting to achieve because of the aspect to the first house. At the same time, Saturn will be making an aspect, also to the opposite house, which is the 5th house. And in that instance, it's not a good time to make investments like in the stock market or into some sort of financial endeavor or risk taking, because that's represented by the 5th house, and Saturn will be blocking and restricting success there for you. There can be difficulties with children. You know, maybe your children have problems, or there's some clashes between you and your children. There can also be difficulties getting pregnant if you're wanting to get pregnant, according to the Hindu system, with Saturn's transit through the 11th house opposing the 5th house. And finally, Saturn will also be aspecting the 8th house, which is in this case Scorpio. So Saturn's aspect to the 8th house can bring hindrances to inheritances, difficulties with joint finances and mutual resources, and issues also with the reproductive organs. Sometimes we might see need for a hysterectomy, or things not functioning right. There might be cysts on ovaries and all those sorts of things. Saturn making an aspect to the 8th house and giving difficulties with reproductive organs, according to the Hindu system. So I hope this video has proved helpful and insightful to you to know what to expect when you have Saturn transiting your 11th house. And I hope you join me next week to find out all about what it means to have Saturn transiting the 12th house in the horoscope.